Hi, this is Graphically Alex coming at you with all things fat related. If that's something that interests you, please subscribe. I'd love to have you. Today we are going to continue this episode about how weight loss will not save you from oppression. I believe we have some bloaters on our hands. For those of you guys who know that I use The Last of Us zombies as metaphors, basically people within E fall by the letter D that are beyond having a severe issue themselves, they push it onto other people actively and try to normalize it. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm ready. We're going for it now.
Attempts can't be maintained by most people, not their fault. It just doesn't work. So, we can't mitigate it, but for a moment. And I know people who have been like, that moment was great and I'll do it again. You know what I mean? Which I get. But none of this is reaching some place of permanency.
So one of the major things of fat acceptance folklore is that weight loss is simply impossible to maintain. It cannot ever happen. This is one of their most common things. I literally have just reacted to William Hornby saying the same thing. It is so common. It is said all the time, and people say this to themselves in the DIS order every single day. Just so you guys know, on the channel, I call it the toxic ritualistic, aka the TR, because Nita censors any conversations about it on YouTube because they have also been compromised, which I will be getting into that soon. I have somebody who is working on like a deep dive about it. We're going to react to it on the channel, aka Compulsive Rambler, shout out. So I'm definitely going to be reacting to that when she's done. And there's more within that sphere. So there's a lot to talk about in regard to that issue. But yeah, it's a little compromised. It's a little zombified. So they don't want you to talk about downsizing. They don't want you to say it's possible, that kind of stuff. That's why I have to say downsizing. That's why a lot of your favorite creators have to talk like that, because Nita is pushing for censorship. So I will give a name to it. It's important that we know what's going on. Okay.
There's no safety here. There's just hustle here. I mean, I think about the people who will still be fat, even if they go on GLP-1s and lose some weight. Most people don't lose that significant an amount of weight that they will actually adhere to the thin ideal. Right? So they'll still be fat, they'll just be slightly less fat. The goalpost often moves. I think that's another thing that
the goalpost moves within the DIS order and within the DIS ordered. It doesn't move within the general population. Most people have a reasonable expectation of weight normalization. So it's not anything crazy, even though they act like it is. It's not. However, keep in mind that people who tend to be obsessed with these issues, people who tend to talk about it all the time, they tend to have some kind of relationship with the TR, whether it's they're close to it, they know people who are in it, they have been in it themselves, they claim recovery even though they haven't recovered, or hopefully they are actually recovered, but most people who are actually recovered would not continue to shift the goalposts on you. So yeah, just be aware of that. A lot of times people within the reductive side or people within BINGE or MIA, all of it, they all reinforce each other. People don't understand that. So one side will keep pushing that thin ideal down further and further and further. And then the other side will use their behavior to justify gaining and gaining and gaining. So it happens all the time. And people don't understand that. But if somebody's telling you something unhinged, like if they're calling you fat and you're not fat, I would just have a question mark behind that. But it's pretty rare these days, especially in the United States. More often than not, you're going to have people saying you're not when you are. So I would just be aware of like your body fat percentage, get an estimate of that. I love having those scales. I think it really helps if you're struggling with obesity, and just get out of that and stay out of it, period. So, and if people bitch about it, let them bitch. Kesha has a song. I'm in my Kesha era. Kesha has a song called Let 'Em Talk. Let 'Em Talk. Don't give a fuck. You get out of obesity and you stay out, period.
Talking about is how the goalpost always moves, and then it's,
Yeah.
My skin isn't good enough, or now I'm too old.
It's TR.
Or now I'm too this, or like it's like a cat chasing
Projection.
their tail for many people with eating disorders. Even when they arrive at this place that's been elusive for a long time, it's like it slips out of the cat's hands. The tail is gone.
So I think there's this weird, bizarre expectation that even within recovery, you'll never have a body image issue ever again. That doesn't exist. So, what you're trying to do within recovery is get to a normal place. And what is a normal place? A normal place is having momentary or transient body dissatisfaction. That happens to normal people all the time. However, it's just dissatisfaction. It's not a life or death, flight or fight experience. It's not an emotional roller coaster. It's not shocking. It's not, oh my God, I saw this picture and like that's not normal. So if you're getting into that style, that's TR. If it's like you see yourself in the mirror one day and you're just like, and then you just continue on, that's normal. You're not always going to think you look amazing every single day because our feelings change all the time. So the goal is just to have normal emotions about it, not inflated emotions, not surreal emotions, not emotions that you've trained your brain to be hypersensitive to any slight variation or shift in the mirror. If you're doing that, then you're TR. And a lot of work, in my opinion, at least what worked for me, is to just try to de-emotionalize certain things. So you try to de-emotionalize the mirror. So you see the mirror, you're like, you say, no, I shouldn't be doing that. I look the same as I did yesterday. So you start like cutting through it with logic and putting out the fires of it with every single time you see that, and that starts to take pressure off of it. You do that habitually and you don't obsess. So I used to tell people, like, if you're deep in the TR, try not to look in the mirror longer than 10 minutes a day. So no more than that. I think that's a good place to start. Like, you check your outfit, you check your makeup really quick, that kind of thing. You don't stare. Think of it as looking at something hot or touching something hot, right? So you just go like this. You don't go like this and then have your hand like burning on that hot thing. You don't do that. You can just be like, oh, okay. Or, okay. You see, like that. That's kind of how you do it, because you have to teach yourself not to be obsessed. Which, how do you do that? You don't allow it. You set boundaries with yourself. I'm not going to look that long. I'm not going to allow that. And you don't let a running commentary go. So I think one of the biggest things to tell yourself over and over again is, I look exactly the same as I did yesterday. Or it's not that different. I shouldn't be having this feeling about it. It's not a shock. You should never feel shocked by the mirror unless if you like got hit in the face and you have like a huge black eye or something and you didn't know you had that. Like, there has to be something like that. It shouldn't be shocking weight-wise ever. It just shouldn't be, because that stuff is very slow. So don't just like, you have to just kind of snap out of it. I know that's hard to do, but just really tone down the emotion. And you kind of have to tell yourself, like, this isn't real. because it's not surprising. Your heart racing and all this stuff, that's not real. There's no like, tiger in the mirror that's going to come out at you. You're not seeing the ring girl in there. Pennywise isn't in the bathroom with you. It's like you need to chill. This isn't like that. It's not that kind of a situation. You didn't see Bloody Mary in the mirror. You're just seeing yourself. And you look pretty much the same as you did yesterday. Certainly when it comes to weight. So just stop. And you have to like not stare, not fixate. And you have to break that cycle. After you break that habit, then in a couple years, depending on how severe it is, so I don't know your level of severity, but in a while, once you've desensitized the brain to it by just not doing it for a long time, then you can kind of be normal again with the mirror, because then there's no connection to your eating behavior. But you have to divorce that. And that is something that you have to break that neuroplasticity, like you have to change using neuroplasticity, and it does change. It just takes a long time. So you just have to know what you're fighting. Basically, you're fighting the connection. It's the same thing between connection and changing food behaviors or routines or health regimes. You don't do that because of anxiety. You don't do that because you saw yourself in the mirror. You don't do that. There's no connection. So you have to break that. You make these decisions logically and practically when you're calm, and then you stick to them regardless. So you have to think of it that way. But yes, like somebody who's in that issue, if they don't do any of the psychological work, they will start looking at any flaws. And remember that other zombies will do the same thing to you, because they're trying to find a way to delegitimize your progress or to make themselves feel better about it, about not making any progress themselves. And I mean that from an E followed by letter D perspective. I'm not even talking looks wise, because it's not even really about that. It's about the fact that if you have downsized as a huge person and you've maintained it, you are breaking their belief system. And that can happen even if you don't have E followed by letter D. It's just it will sting more if you've had it, or if you do have it currently, or if you're battling it currently. So just be aware that if somebody's telling you shit like that, and they're getting really weird and they're nitpicking you and they're just picking apart your body and doing all that stuff, they probably are a zombie. So you have to break out of that. The way I used to talk about it on the channel is think of them as being on a Netflix subscription and you unsubscribed and they're still on it. And you have to kind of accept that, because you can't control it and other people. And I know that that's hard to do. I'm not saying any of this is easy, but I'm saying it's necessary because you're a survivor. That's why I'm wearing this. I'm wearing the Smo Witch hat. That's the survivalism of the super morbidly obese era represented in the witch. That's why I wear it when I respond to them, because it's pretty egregious, in my opinion. This podcast is pretty bad. It's horrifying.
Again, and now the carrot moves, and now it's something else. This idea that there's enough, that we're enough, is not going to be found in thinness.
Mm-hmm. And if the
No, but better health will be. So I think that's what we have to focus on.
goalpost keeps moving, to me, that's kind of speaks to disordered eating or eating disorder.
It doesn't in terms of health, though. Like when you have a normal weight, the goalpost is met. When we're talking vanity, it's a totally different discussion. And it requires a different approach, different standards. It's just totally different. So we need to separate the two.
You know, like that's where we start getting into some of the diagnostic criteria. Not to say it wasn't there in other ways or before, but that's where we start to meet some diagnostic criteria for disordered eating disorder.
Remember, most people don't have it.
We can't stop.
But it is common in families. I personally believe there's a genetic connection, but it must be triggered. So the way that I've described it on the channel often is there is a inherited neuroticism, typically from a parent, typically runs in families. And that neuroticism, when traumatized or triggered or activated, can then become about your body size. And then that's when it goes into that. Then it can go into the E followed by the letter D. So that is my hypothesis. That is what I have witnessed. I have experienced it. I've seen it in many, many people. That's why you can have some families where one child never develops one and the other one does, because one wasn't triggered and the other one was. So also there's a lot of obsessive traits in people in the TR. So I do think obsessiveness is a thing. Within bingo specifically, rumination. If you're a ruminating type of person, you're at risk. It's very, very like, I can't believe this happened to me. I can't believe this happened to me. Oh my gosh, they said this. They said that to me. I don't know. This is horrible that they said this to me. Like that type of thing. And it can go on for hours. Like if you're that kind of person, then in my opinion, you're more at risk for bingo. So, anyways.
Yeah, it's subtle.
This reminds me of the thing that is often said, that we often say around, we prescribe eating disorders for
Same thing with finances. It's like, I don't know if I can afford this. I don't know if I can afford that. I don't know about this. I don't know about that. Blah, blah, blah. Like if you're that kind of person where you think about things like that, and there's a lot of anxiety there, bingo will come a-calling. And some of those aspects of your personality, they're not going to go away. They do become less pronounced as you weight normalize and become healthier and get rid of nutrient deficiencies, though. So you do normalize over time. But I mean, you're probably going to be obsessive in some ways. You're going to have like a lot of hobbies that you love and stuff. It doesn't have to be a bad thing, but I'm just saying it is a thing.
people in larger bodies on a regular basis because they quote unquote need to lose weight. And I like the impact of that not only are you essentially like whether it's through medicine or through like the pressures of the culture pushing people into disordered eating and then continuing to do it.
Again, the most external pressure is from people within the issue. That's who will do it the most. You're not going to get tons of it just from general people. That's not true.
Sometimes people, that's not even left to their own devices. They wouldn't have done that. And that's
false. So again, they act like you can catch it like a cold. That's not true, but it's because their definition of DIS ordered or E followed by the letter D is so broad that by their standard, even going on a diet, going through like doing a fast one time would be enough. Exercising once when you don't feel like it, that would be enough for them. So you have to understand that. And none of those at all meet criteria whatsoever. Even overeating on a day is not enough. Like it is a whole system. It is a whole thing. So they say that too flippantly, in my opinion, because it makes people start to think that they have one and they don't. This is further complicated, however, because sometimes within bingo, you can be totally delusional about having it. Because I was that way. I was like, it's my genetics. This is just how I am. That's a famous line of bingos. This is just how I am. That's one of the favorite ones. The other one is the food addict one. That's a big one. So, which I don't need to get into why I don't like that label, but it's just not helpful in TR recovery at all, in my opinion, because I guess I have to say it just doesn't take into account being overly reductive. Within addiction, there isn't like a sweet spot, It's usually just about abstaining. If you want to say it from abstaining from bingo, sure. But you also have to abstain from being overly reductive. You have to abstain from staring in the mirror, right? There's more to it. So it just becomes kind of clunky. And so I really prefer the word disorder just because it describes it more as a system, because it's not just one thing, it's all of it. So, yeah. It's not a substance abuse issue. It has to do with like a system, typically a system of belief, and then belief combined with behavior. So it can't just be belief. You have to have the behavior too. And it has to be repetitive enough, happen often enough, for long enough to be within criteria. And yeah. So I believe off the top of my head, it is a bingo once a week for 3 months, I think is the criteria. That's off the top of my head, but you can double check. But if you're not there, then you could be subclinical. Again, you can have some beliefs, like you can believe weight is genetic and you still don't have an EFOL by letter D. You have to have it all together. It is a system. So sometimes people just overeat a lot. Sometimes people get close to bingo, but they're not actually doing it. It's not far enough, or it's more of an overeating thing. Sometimes people have insulin resistance or hypothyroidism or diabetes or these types of things that make satiety less. Sometimes people have nutrient deficiencies that make them hungrier. There's a lot of stuff that's also physical. So you probably don't have bingo. Typically people don't. But if you're very, very big, if you are super morbidly obese, you may have it. It's probably like a coin toss at worst, or it's very likely you do have it. Unless if you can explain it, or there is a physical condition that explains it. And that does include ADHD, because that is a dopamine issue. So it's still a hormonal issue. So if it's not explained by anything, any hormonal issue or dysfunction, and you're like very big, you're like 350 pounds, you probably have it. So in that case, I'd say you probably do. And you may have it in addition to ADHD, insulin resistance, hypothyroidism. It's not mutually exclusive. So keep in mind, comorbidities are very common at big sizes. It has to be pretty severe to get very big. Yeah. But it's a bad sign. For people who aren't as severe, it's a bad sign if you're obsessed with the mirror. That's kind of like I need to think about this. If you're doing that, you might have it. And then just look at that criteria. But even if it's close, you still need to stop. It doesn't really matter. Bingo's always bad. And there's this weird myth in recovery that you need to bingo to recover. You don't. That is a load of crap. So cessation completely, stopping, not going back whatsoever, that'll get you out of the issue. Because if you break it, it's gone. It'll die. You have to do all of them. You have to be reductive in some way. You have to stare at the mirror, and you have to bingo. If you stop doing one of those, with the exception of reduction, because sometimes if you just think about it, it's enough. But a lot of times people they don't have like all the food groups and stuff even still. So it's very common. But regardless, people will use like the special K cereal diet that they did in 2003 and it's 2026. They'll use that as an excuse or a reason why they have to bingo today. So if you're doing that, it's still there, but it's like the memory of it. And then typically when people try to stop bingoing, then they'll start becoming overly reductive. So if you immediately whiplash, you're still in it. So you just do the basic bitch, 1 to 2 pounds per week, especially if you're severe. I really suggest just counting. And if you're like, I can't count, I can't, that's a warning sign. I'm letting you know that's a problem. Like if you're super morbidly obese and you cannot count for the sake of your health and the sake to just have basic human functions, you are probably in it. It's unreasonable. So I'm just saying it is not logical to do that. It's just not.
Really bums me out to think that the culture, the pressure of the culture is so intense that we end up entering cycles of self-harm as a way to escape. Well, it's deeply troubling to me.
Mm-hmm.
But no one would ever describe dieting as self-harm.
Not when we've had Healthism step in,
Mm-hmm.
And say, no, it's because I'm healthy. I'm thinking about.
So very severe zombies, people that are very severely in the issue, and this goes for really any of them, they don't care about their health at all. I was this way. I even used to say that to myself. Like, I remember I was trying to downsize and I was doing keto, which for me, it's not good. And I was like, I don't care if this affects my health. I'll deal with it later. If you say that, and that's backed up by action, because I did it very harshly and overly reductive, because I thought it was an addiction. So I speak from experience. Honey, no. Don't listen to the other zombies. They're going to be sometimes in the comments, that is one. No, it's not. Don't listen to them. Because then you're going to be dumb like me and you're going to overdo it on the reductive side, thinking it's an addiction when it's not. So, especially if you're severe. So don't, because my health got much worse after that. So, and that was my thought process. I just don't want to be fat anymore. I will just do whatever. If you're thinking that, honey, like, I'm ringing the alarms right now. Like, that's really bad. You don't ever want to believe that. Ever. I don't care if you're just vanity. You don't want to ever believe that. Never. So that's a never statement. You don't do that. But it's the same thing with bingo. You don't say, I'm going to just do it because I don't care about my health. You don't do that either. You don't have this devil may care attitude. You don't do that. You stop. So you're not going to be like, well, I don't care. Who cares? I'm too far gone anyway. No. Bullshit. It doesn't matter. Yes, it does. So when you're saying things like that to yourself, it's deeply DIS ordered. Okay? And people do that with bingo too. And they do that with the reduction within bingo. You don't care. If you're severe, you don't care about your health. You don't. And these women don't. They're dressing it up in like a political discussion of healthism. And people fall for it all the time. They fall for the political buzzwords when it comes to this issue. That's why they use it. They use it to hide, because you can't hide how big you're getting. You can't hide how big you are. You can't hide how drastic the fluctuation is. So what are you going to do? You have to dress it up in a bunch of language. That will get people to leave you the fuck alone. That's the whole point. So it's awful. But what they're saying decoded is, I don't care about health. And if you care about health, you're stupid. That's basically what they're saying. And they're saying that especially to people within the issue. So to somebody who has bingo, they're going to hear that and they're going to think, so if I care about my health, then I'm going to become the evil thin person that looks down on fat people then. And I don't want that. I don't want to become mean, even though they already are mean most of the time. But I think a lot of people that are deep in the issue, they don't even like all of these issues make you meaner. They all do. Because you become, like within bingo, you become so bitter and you're always comparing yourself to people, and it creates so much jealousy, and especially of thin people. And so you can't empathize on a psychological level, even with a thin person. But when you combine it with hormonal dysfunction, hypothyroidism, high cortisol, anxiety, physical anxiety in the body, it creates black and white thinking. You get into the hypohaze because you're so big. You can't look at somebody's point of view because your body's in survival mode. And that's not, your brain doesn't look at empathy as it's not a necessity in a survival moment. So it shuts it off. So you can have it physically shut off at severe levels, but even psychologically shut off because you're so jealous of people who are thin that you can't look at them clearly anymore. It's really awful. And then you treat people like crap if they've downsized because it's so biting. And you think like they won the lottery or something, or they put their coin down the wishing well and they just lucked out. And it creates so much hostility and bitterness that then you'll pick apart how they look and you'll do all this crap. It's really awful. It really is horrible. And it's not excusable. It's also not who you are. So you need to let it go. It's DIS ordered. I'm not talking about all this from like a psychic perspective. I'm talking about this this is all so typical of the problem. It's a zombie infection. It's documented. It's typical. All of it's typical. And because it's more rare than people act like, you think that you're the only person that feels that way. But sometimes you'll think that even if you have people in your own family or in your own home that feel that way. Because you can't feel how you can't empathize well. So you can't even understand that other people are feeling the exact same way or doing the same shit because you don't talk about it because it sounds horrible. But the whole thing is horrible. That's why you don't tell anybody. And so what fat acceptance does is it dresses it up in this weird language, and they push it covertly so that they can reinforce each other and all this stuff. It's really horrible. And it happens in the reductive side too. I don't know if it's super coded. Again, I'm not super within that, but I just know that there were certainly online spaces too that did that. Or still do it, to be honest, I'm sure.
What happens when we have a thought like that? Like, no, I'm doing this for my health. When there's other active reasons why, but you lean on that. And I'm thinking about.
So I don't understand. I'm sorry that I have to cut it off so much. It's just so egregious. This is just such an egregious podcast or episode or whatever. But what is up with this? Like, you are the last people that should be trying to understand, or like, you're the last people that I would trust to read somebody else's situation or put yourself in somebody else's shoes. You're probably walking around hypohazy. You're within the DIS order terribly. So even psychologically, you can't put yourself in their shoes. You're so far from reality. Why do you think you can do that? I don't get it. And they, like, people within bingo, this is like bingo stuff. We think, like, when I was in it too, it's so common. You think you're so deep. You think that you understand everybody so much better, or you see past it all or whatever because you're fat. And so it's like you're downtrodden and everybody just looks past you and you're special because of that. And you say all this shit to yourself, but it's a bunch of bullshit. It's crap. All it is that you have this horrible coping mechanism that you refuse to get rid of. And you tie it up with all this bingo noise. Forget food noise. We're going to talk about bingo noise. in the brain. That's all. It's this chatter. It's like this never-ending commentary. It's Pennywise. I called it Pennywise on the channel. The reason why I call it Pennywise is because it's similar to that, where it can take so many different forms because people have different triggers and then you don't ever talk about it. It's a secret. So it's like, it's just horrible. Honestly, it's really bad. So
that through in a couple ways. One, what does it mean to lie to yourself? What does it mean when you can't tell the whole truth? Also, for a whole bunch of reasons. And what's the impact of that on you? And then the other thing I'm thinking is, when I find myself or I see my clients entering into a place where they have this one story and they need to stick to it and they can't, and analysis isn't interesting to them or available, I'm like, this falls into like a very kind of unresolved place. Kind of people overuse the word trauma, and I would be doing that by using that word here, perhaps.
Okay, 1 second. So I just want to clarify something really quick. The reason that I have to cut it off so much is basically almost every single time that I'm cutting them off, they reinforce something. So when I listen to this, I counter basically every single thing that they're saying. And I know to a lot of people that can be like really excessive, or like, why is he doing that? But I'm keeping the person with the issue in mind. So it's just, think of how much I'm stopping it, and that's how much is being communicated. And I understand I've been struggling a bit on my channel just because there is a difference between attacking or trying to help people within the issue, or try to help people see certain things within the issue, see what they're actually saying to them, because sometimes it can be kind of subconscious. And then I'm trying to educate the general public on what this stuff means too, because I want you guys to be able to know too. And if you are just like a normal person that's just on a downsizing journey, that's perfectly healthy and fine, I want you to know where this is coming from too. So you're like, oh God. So you don't listen, because it's a bunch of bullshit. So I know it's tough. It is a bit of a conundrum. It is hard to balance the two, but that's why I go so detailed and like I put it really under a microscope. I know it's annoying for some people, but that's why. So it is what it is. I'm trying to show what I want you to understand as a general person is look at how much they are reinforcing that, and they'll do this within a minute. It's sort of like string, boom, 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 like all across within one sentence, within 1 minute. They'll say 2 or 3 sentences and they've reinforced and hit 10 points of the DIS order. So it's like, I know it's hard to, you don't pick up on it as a general person. And I understand that. But I'm trying to provide a counter, an argument against these DIS order, like this TR logic that's just flying around. This one's really bad. So usually it's not that bad, but this is very bad. Like it's almost everything they say. I feel like this is just the first one I've heard, but it's literally like this episode is literally one of the most death promoting things I've heard in a long time. It's pretty bad. So remember that they're very severe, and it's not going to be as bad for most people that have bingo. And remember that there are shades of that. So if you're not as bad, you're going to have more empathy than them. They have none. Okay, so there's shades of gray. There's a difference. You can be further in it or not as bad in it. That also exists. So I don't want you to think like, oh, well, I have a parent that has this. They have zero empathy. No. But if they're saying things like this, then they don't. So you see there's shades of it. They might have a little bit less than they would otherwise, right? But just because somebody has less, it doesn't mean that they have none. And people also can be fully in it or on the path to recovery. I call it a warm bodies experience, where it's like you're starting to become aware of your zombiness and you're getting out of it. So, for example, I wasn't out of the DIS order till 2020, but I had kind of an awakening and I got a sense of awareness in 2014. So by 2015, I could be just friends with thin people and I didn't have any issue of comparison all the time. I could just see people that were thin as human. And I know that sounds weird, but that means, yes, there was a time when I didn't. You know, I didn't see it that way. I saw them like as on a pedestal, and that pedestal they can fall off or they can be put on it, you know? So you have to be aware, like there are shades of gray too. I just want you to understand that as a general person. So if you're dealing with somebody who's super fat, that very clearly is in this issue, it's very obvious, they can't even hide it anymore. They're so horrible in it. And you feel like they just don't understand you, and you're a thin person and they just don't understand you at all. And they seem cold towards you at times, or like what you're going through doesn't matter. They don't have any empathy for you. You know, there's so much evidence, but if it's just like a little bit less, or maybe they're not as bad or whatever, that can happen too. So don't think it's automatic. When it comes to them, it is that bad because of what they're saying. When you get to a point where you're actively pushing death, it's extremely severe. There's no empathy left, right? Within these zombies, there's basically no humanity left. And I'm dealing with this, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is so bad. So I want you guys to not listen to this, especially if you're within the issue or you're getting out, you're aware, you know, you're dealing with your comorbidities, you're getting psychological intervention for trauma, you're doing all the steps. Do not listen to stuff like this. It is caustic. It is horrible. And you have to learn how to argue against it, okay? I want you to succeed. That's why I'm doing this. And for people in the general public, I want you to understand that sometimes it really is that deep with this stuff. This one is very bad. Like I said, it's usually not this bad. This is a whole other level. Like, it really is crazy.
But it also reminds me of the kinds of thoughts that we stick to when there's something we can't resolve. That's maybe the way I'll say it.
I've been reading a fair amount lately about spiritual energy leaks. And often spiritual energy leaks are very analogous to open wounds. Right? And that immediately came to mind when you were talking about these. It's not quite trauma, but it is a place of...
So they're using woo-woo to reinforce too. I told you guys, I said that. They'll use that too. It's not just politics. So for my spiritual girlies and boilies, I told you, they'll use that too. That's interesting. I haven't heard that one yet, but here it is. So this is as recent as last year. So I'm sure there'll be a lot more of that to come.
Unresolved. And I think it exists in that same space, like an open wound or a spiritual energy, like a place where energy is either spent or pushed through that place, and it shouldn't be, because, like, you know, if it was resolved, if it was closed, that wouldn't be happening. But because it continues to be open, reopened, like, yeah, it can't heal.
Yeah, it's like you keep just kind of picking at the wound a little bit, rubbing into it, bumping into it. And, you know, that's an interesting thing, because we're talking about how when people think they're on a weight loss journey, it doesn't matter if they're healing anything. Like the weight loss steps in. I think it probably matters to people, but like the weight loss kind of steps in as a foil for healing.
It's like a proxy.
Yeah,
So it's a physical healing first. However, there can be spiritual aspects to it, emotional aspects, psychological aspects, depending on what got you there. So if whatever is giving you a barrier to getting to the goal of a normalized weight, you have to deal with it. I would assume it's the same way from other ones in the TR too. Other types of issues. I would absolutely assume it's the same. You have to deal with those wounds. You have to deal with that trauma. You have to deal with the inability to handle uncertainty, for example. You have to process that stuff. You have to get past that. And that does require, whether you want to call it spiritual, psychological, emotional, whatever you want to call it, it doesn't really matter. It's not purely physical at that point. It requires growth. Even within a vanity perspective, there often is spiritual growth through the discipline required, through sacrificing comfort in the sense for healthy discipline. Remember, I always advocate for health and all that stuff, keep your nutrition high, take breaks, etc. Within vanity, it's a totally different discussion. Also, I like to quote Taylor with this, but beauty is a beast that roars down on all fours, demanding more. You have to be aware of that too. So don't go nuts over it. But there's nothing wrong with dressing nice or something. There's nothing wrong with that on its face. But that's a spiritual question, right? That's an emotional or philosophical question that you have to answer within a vanity journey. What is too far? What isn't? But that's why I always tell you guys to have your own standards, all that kind of stuff. It's super important because it will keep you from the TR. Because so much of the TR is comparison, competition, that type of stuff. It reinforces it. So you need to really be careful with that, especially if you're early in recovery. Try your best not to compete. Try your best not to compare, ever. So I even experienced that a year ago where I was so used to toxic ritualistic comparison that I started getting really jealous over issues unrelated to weight a year ago when I reached my mid-size era, because I was getting to the point of no longer being fat. And I didn't have that to compare based on anymore. So I started to compare other aspects of life, and I was like, what the fuck is wrong with me? And then I realized, oh, you've been comparing for over a decade all the time because you're fat and you were in the TR. So it's you have to stop that now. And I was like, oh my God, I didn't even think about it because you're just so used to things that it just flows, and you have to stop that. You just got to stop. There's nothing wrong with being competitive or whatever, but I'm just telling you, do not make it about size. Do not. That's, it's a simple boundary. Go be competitive about a video game or something. Go be competitive about style. I don't know. Who cares? It's I dress better than you. Okay. Go be competitive with money. I mean, I don't think you should be a horrible person about it, but I'm not an anti-competitive person. I'm just saying, for the love of God, do not make it about size. And if you're an atheist, it's not logical to make it about size. It's kind of, it's risky, put it to you that way. It's treacherous. If you've struggled with this issue, you need to just let that go. Certain things you just can't do, or you just can't. You have to tone it down all the time. Constantly mitigate it, right? So you don't feed into it. It's not that it will never happen, because it's not really about that within TR recovery. It's about not feeding it. So you don't see, oh, I'm thinner than this person, or oh, I'm fatter than that person. I'm going to put all this emotion into it. You don't do that. That's what people do. You don't. So you just think it and then just let it go. Or you think it and it's oh yeah. It doesn't really matter, but it's kind of funny. Or, oh, I feel kind of about it. You see, but don't make it intense, and then don't feed into it. And then you just go to the next thought. That's more normal. You see? So it's a process, trust, especially if you're severe. It's going to be some years of like taking apart all these layers and stuff. Like if you're not as severe, it won't take as long.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that everything else will just fall in line if this happens. And I mean, part of why we started Be Nourished back in the day and started doing our groups is because it didn't help. People were still unhappy. People would say in my office, I'd love to weigh what I weighed when I started dieting. Well, how'd you feel about your body? Oh, I hated myself. I thought I was disgusting. It's always,
So they're correct about that. Self-hatred is fuel to the fire of the TR. I will say though that weight loss is not self-hatred. So it's not. That's the connection they're trying to make. That's the reinforcing aspect. No.
something we're looking back in the past or looking into the future. It's so disembodying and takes us out of the present moment, which is where we are and where we live.
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up, Dana, because I keep feeling really pulled back to those early days of Be Nourished and Center for Body Trust work in my mind because of what's happening right now with GLP-1s. And when I started having these conversations, I was new to my own.
You have to stop trying to control other people. If you're in the TR, you can't. If you're getting out, you just have to understand. You have to get comfortable with the idea of, I can't control what other people do. You can give an argument for or against it, but you can't control it. And you just leave it at that. You know, I have a very nuanced take on Ozempic. I'm very skeptical of it, but I don't outright demonize it. You see, so I'm very midline. You want to also keep things as gray as you can when it comes to this stuff, because people will be super against it or super for it. They think very, very black and white. Be very careful of that. But in terms of like, can I control what somebody else does? You can't. There's a lot of things in life that we can't control. It's similar to you can't control how other people see you. These are very difficult for people in the TR to deal with. It's very hard. And that's pretty much across the board with those ones, those two aspects. It can feel scary and all this stuff, but you've never had control over either one of those. So if you think you do, you're delusional. You can't control what other people do, and you can't control how other people see you. That's never been real. So that's something you have to let go of. And people use that to fuel their behaviors, and it's not. When I hear somebody's on Ozempic, or when I talk about Ozempic, it's so separated from my recovery. It's so separated from my journey that I don't have any emotional weight behind it. You want to get there because you can't control. It's the same thing when I hear somebody talk about dieting, when I hear somebody talk about how much they can't stand their body or something like that. You create that wall of separation between you and them because it's not your body. It's not your journey. And it keeps the anxiety lower because you have to protect yourself in that way. It's a boundary you have to set because you can't let that affect you so much. And a lot of people within fat acceptance, they're so freaked about the Ozempic thing because they can't control it. It's an attempt to try to control it or to try to control what other people do, and they can't. So they get anxious. So then they obsess over it. And you can't allow that. You can think about something, but don't let it affect you anxiety-wise. Do not become anxious about it, and don't let it affect your emotions, is what I'm trying to say. And you have to learn that because a lot of times people within bingo, I would say especially, we don't have separation there. We can't control the difference between anxiety, emotion, and like thought. They're all the same to us. You need to like be able to separate it a bit because the anxiety is actually different from both of the other two. And feelings are not thoughts either. Like you can feel like you can feel, for example, this is specifically for bingo, you can feel deprived without actually being deprived. That can be a hard concept, but that's the kind of stuff you have to do. That's how normal people think. You can argue about an idea, and it's not who you are that's being argued about. It's about an idea. So you can argue about Ozempic. It's not who you are. Somebody's not taking Ozempic to not look like you. Somebody's not downsizing to not look like you. No. You're talking about an idea. You're talking about a method or something of how they're doing it. That's a different discussion. It doesn't have to do with who you are. You have to learn how to separate anxiety, thoughts, emotions, anxiety, feelings, thoughts. Separate them out and be able to tell which is which. That's extremely helpful within recovery, because that's what I do. I hear people talk about it. It's not part of my journey. That wall is up, right? It's not a part of my journey. So it doesn't scare me. It doesn't freak me out when I hear it. And if I ever were to get anxious, I'd be like, Alex, you can't control it. Oh, you're right. I remember that. Yeah. Or that's right. It's like, I can't. So I'm not going to try. So, and it's not on me to do so either. So then you're like, okay. Then you just kind of breathe. Because it's the same thing with anything in life. People will make mistakes, whether it's outside of weight or not. And most people, they can look at it, if they think about it from a different issue, it's like, well, of course I wouldn't try to control that. Well, okay. Well, it's the same thing with diet. It's the same thing with Ozempic. It's the same thing with weight. You shouldn't try to, because you can't. You can offer an argument. You can offer a statement of criticism. You can offer praise, but you can't control. And there's a difference. And you need to learn how to see that difference. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and leave it there. I'm sorry that I have to cut it off all the time, but it really is that bad. And it's pretty deep what they're saying. So I feel like I have to cover a lot of stuff. And for my general population people, I know it can be a bit repetitive at times, but understand I need to be repetitive for people with the problem, because you have to hear it over and over. Okay? I will talk to you guys later. I hope you guys have a great weekend. I'll see you next week. And I'll see my members tomorrow or tonight, depending. You guys know I post that like all late. So I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.